In our next section, we're going to talk about multiplying decimals and then something that's called circumference of circles. Okay. And for topic one, we're just going to look at multiplying decimals. Okay. So the steps to multiplying decimals, it's very similar to multiplying whole numbers, but you do have to deal with this actual decimal point. So you have to figure out where the decimal point goes in your answer. And that can be a little bit weird. So the first example I show you, I'm going to show you and hopefully make a connection with fractions that'll help, but all the same. You want to line up the decimals vertically according to the right-hand side. Now remember, when we were adding and subtracting decimals, we had to line them up according to the decimal point, and then we had to add filler zeros at the end of the decimal so that each number had the same number of decimal places. That was kind of this weird connection to finding an LCD. Okay, so by having the same number of decimal places, we in a weird way had a common denominator. Well, remember, when you're multiplying fractions, you don't need a common denominator. So kind of the same thing here. We don't need to have decimal points line up. So we want to right-hand align our numbers just like we would have with whole numbers. Okay. And then you multiply the numbers as if they were whole numbers. So you can refer back to section 1.6 if you need to review, okay? And then here's where the decimal comes in at the end, okay? You want to count the number of decimal places in your factors. So how many decimal places did your factors have total? And that's the number of decimal places you need in your answer. So we want to place the decimal in the product so that it matches the number of decimal places in the factors, okay? Which is a little bit weird, but bear with me and hopefully this won't be too bad. So let's go ahead and look at example one. It just says find each product, okay? And the first example I made kind of easy so that we can sort of off to the side see this connection between decimals and fractions, okay? So if we had 7/10 times 300ths, okay? So zero point 0.7 is 7/10, 0.03 is 300ths. That's how we would formally say it. That translates quite literally to 7/10 times 3/100ths, okay? And when we're multiplying fractions, remember, we don't have to worry about an LCD. We just had to multiply across. So 7 times 3 would have been 21, but 10 times 100 would have been 1,000. Okay, so let's remember that there's this really weird connection with decimal places and the number of zeros and powers of 10. Okay, so we have 1 0 here, we have 2 0 here, 2 zeros in 100. So that's kind of like one decimal place. It'd be cool if I could spell, huh? It's been a long day and it's a late night. So this is one decimal place. And this kind of represents two decimal places. And if you look at my final answer, well, doggone, 2 plus 1 is 3, and I have 3 decimal places in my final answer. Well, that is why we do this part here. Okay, you want to count the number of decimal places in your factors. So look at how I did this with my fractions. I had 1 0 in my power of 10 plus 2 zeros in my power of 10 for 300ths, and my final answer had 3 zeros in the power of 10. That's the same thing as counting the number of decimal places in your decimal and making sure your product has the same number of decimal places. Okay, so let's look at how we would do this just with decimals. We want to right-hand align our numbers. So I would put 0.03 times zero point 0.7 written vertically like this. We do not have to line up our decimal points. And then you multiply just like you always would if these were whole numbers. So I'm going to start with this 7 right here. I'm going to multiply it by 3. So I get 21. So I keep a 1. I carry a 2. Well, 7 times 0 is 0, but I carried 2, so I have to add that 2. So 7 times 0 is 0, plus 2 is 2, and then 7 times 0 is just 0. This 0 here, we don't even have to multiply by it, okay? I can just go ahead and count my decimal places. So I have one decimal place. Well, that's a lie. I have two decimal places. And then I have one decimal place. And the directions here say count the decimal places in your factors and then place the decimal in the product so that it matches the sum of the decimal places. So 2 decimal places plus 1 decimal place is 3 decimal places. So my final answer is 0.021 or 21 thousandths. Okay, so that whole like counting decimal places and making sure the product has the sum of those decimal places, it's not a fluke. It's because of this weird connection that we have to fractions. Okay, so we're not going to do the fraction thing anymore. I just wanted you to understand why we do that whole counting decimal places. From now on, we're just going to get right to it. Okay, so for part B, I have 45.9 times 0.42. So I'm going to go off to the side and write 45.9. And I'm going to multiply by 0.42. Notice I do not line up my decimals. We don't have to do that with multiplication, okay? And now I'm just going to start multiplying. So I'm going to multiply by 2. So 2 times 9 is 18, so I'm going to keep an 8, carry a 1. 2 times 5 is 10, plus the 1 I carried is 11, so I keep a 1, carry a 1. And then let's see, 2 times 4 is 8, plus the 1 I carried is 9. So that is technically like multiplying by the ones place. And if we scoot over, we're sort of pretending we're multiplying by the tens place. So remember, we put the 0 in the 10 here, and then we multiply, okay? So I'm going to cross out these ones so I don't get confused. Now I'm going to take the top number and multiply each of those digits by 4. So 4 times 9 is 36, so I keep a 6, I carry a 3. 4 times 5 is 20, plus the 3 I carried is 23, so I keep a 3. I carry a 2. And then let's see, 4 times 4 is 16, plus the 2 I carried is 18. And since that's my last multiplication for this row, I just write out the full 18. I don't really have to multiply by that 0 in front of the 0.42. So I want to add my partial product. So let's see, I get 8 plus 0 is 8. 6 plus 1 is 7. 9 plus 3 is 12. So I keep a 2. I carry a 1. 8 plus 1 is 9. And then there's nothing to add to this last one, so I just drop it down. Okay? Now let's do that whole decimal place thing. In 45.9, I have one decimal place. I'm just going to put DP for the sake of time. In 42, I have 3 decimal places. That tells me my final answer needs to have 1 plus 2 or 3 decimal places. So I want to make sure my final answer has 3 decimal places. So 45.9 times 0.42 is 19 and 278 thousandths. Okay, so it's really like multiplying whole numbers. We just have to do that weird decimal place thing at the end. Okay, so let's look at part C. So for part C, we have 36 times point, well, correction, we have negative 36 times 0.8. And remember, if you multiply a positive and a negative, you're going to get a negative as your final product. So I'm going to go ahead and put an equals and a negative. And then when I do my side work, I don't have to worry about the negative. So I've got 36 times 0.8. All right, so I line everything up. I don't have to worry about creating decimal points and lining that up. I want to multiply the 36 by 8. So let's see, 8 times 6 is 48. So I keep an 8. I carry a 4. 8 times 3 is 24. And then 24 plus 4 is 28. Okay. Now, in my first number, I had 0 decimal places. In my second number, I had 1 decimal place, or my second factor is what I should say. So my final answer needs 1 decimal place. So I'm going to put 1 decimal place, and that tells me negative 36 times 0.8 is negative 28.8. All right. One more for this example. So we have negative 5.42 times negative 1.31. And remember, if you multiply two negatives, the product is positive. So I'm going to put equals. And we don't generally write positive numbers with a plus. I'm putting the plus there mostly to remind myself, hey, don't forget you have a positive final answer. Okay? So now let's see. We have 5.42 times 1.31. It's just coincidence that the decimal places line up. Okay? So we're going to start by multiplying everything by 1. So 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 4 is 4. And 1 times 5 is 5. So that was technically multiplying the ones place. Now we're technically multiplying by what's in the tens place. So I'm going to put the 0 and 10 here and then multiply everything by 3. Okay? So 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 4 is 12. So I keep a 2, carry a 1. 3 times 5 is 15, but I carried a 1, so that makes it 16. Okay. Now, technically, the 1 in 1.31, the first one, is going to be really in the hundreds place. So we need to put the two zeros and 100 here, then we can just multiply everything by 1. And I'm going to scribble out that 1 so I don't accidentally carry it again or add it in again. So let's see, 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 4 is 4, 1 times 5 is 5. I have three partial products, so I'm going to go ahead and add those. So let's see, 2 plus 0 plus 0 is 2. 4 plus 6 plus 0 is 10, so I keep a 0, carry a 1. 1 plus 5 is 6, plus 2 is 8, plus 2 again is 10, so I keep a 0, carry a 1. 1 plus 6 is 7, 7 plus 4 is 11, so I keep a 0, carry a 1. And then 1 plus 1 is 2, plus 5 is 7. And now we have to figure out the decimal places. So 5.42 has two decimal places. 1.31 has two decimal places. The sum of that is four decimal places, and that tells me how many decimal places I need in my final answer, my final product. So I need to go back and create four decimal places. So negative 5.42 times negative 1.31 is positive 7.1002, or 7 and 1,002 10,000ths, which is kind of a mouthful. Okay? So there you have it. That is multiplying decimals. Not the hardest thing you're ever going to do, but you do need to be relatively familiar with the multiplication tables. If you're not, you can have a multiplication table with you if you do anything in class, but keep working on those. Try to commit as many of those multiplication tables to memory as possible. Okay, let's go ahead and do example 2 with example 1. So example 2 says estimate each product by rounding to the nearest whole number. Okay, and then we're going to compare the estimation with the actual product. Okay, so we're basically going to see if we have an overestimate or an underestimate. So this is like what we did with the addition and subtraction worksheet. It's kind of like three problems in one. Okay, so let's get to it. All right, so for part A, we want to round, and we're rounding to the nearest whole number, which is the ones place. All right, so for 30.62, the 0 is in the ones place. To the right of that, I have a 2, which tells me to round down. So what I'm really being asked is 30.26 closer to 30 or 31? And we would say it's closer to 30 here. All right, now 2.98, the nearest whole number, that's the ones place, which is a 2. To the right of that, I have a 9, which tells me to round up. So essentially, I'm being asked, is 2.98 closer to 2 or to 3? And it's definitely closer to 3. And now 30 times 3, that's easy mental math. I would just take the 3 and 30 and multiply it by the 3, so that gives me a 9. And then I can just add this 0 here, makes it 90. Or you can really think 33 times is 90. Either way, we get an estimate of 90. Now, off to the side here, let's go ahead and figure out the actual product, okay? So we have 30.26 times 2.98. Okay, so I'm going to start by multiplying everything by 8. So 8 times 6 is 48, so I keep an 8, carry a 4. 8 times 2 is 16, plus 4 is 20, so I keep a 0, carry a 2. 8 times 0 is 0, plus 2 is 2. 8 times 3 is 24. Okay, so that was technically multiplying by the ones place. When I multiply by the 9, that's really the tens place, so I'm going to put the 0 in, in the tens place here, and then I'm going to multiply everything by 9. Okay. So let's see, 9, I'm going to erase these so they're not in my way because I'm going to run out of room, I fear. All right, so 9 times 6 is 54, so keep a 4, carry a 5. 9 times 2 is 18, but then add 5, that gives me 23. 9 times 0 is 0, plus 2 is 2. And then 9 times 3 is 27, okay? Now, I'm technically, when I multiply by the 2, that's really in the hundreds place. So I'm going to put my 2 zeros here, and then I can multiply everything by 2. So let's see, 2 times 6 is 12, so I keep a 2, I carry a 1. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. 2 times 0 is just 0, there's nothing to add. And then 2 times 3 is 6. I've got my partial products here we want to add. So let's see, 8 plus 0 plus 0 is 8. 0 plus 4 plus 0 is 4. 2 plus 3 plus 2 is 7. Let's see, 4 plus 2 is 6, plus 5 is 11. 1 plus 2 is 3, plus 7 is 10, so keep a 0, carry a 1. And then let's see, 6 plus 2 plus 1 is 9. Let's figure out our decimal places. So 30.26 has 2 decimal places. 2.98 has 2 decimal places. That means my final answer needs 2 decimal places. That's a lie. It needs 4 decimal places. So we get 90.1748. So our estimate was a little bit low, but it was pretty close. Okay, so we were off by really less than 2/10. Okay, so this is the actual product, and we can see that the estimate is an underestimate, just by a little bit, but it was a little bit less. Underestimate. Can't spell. All right, one more. We have 6.8 times 4.2. So 6.8, we need to find out, is that closer to 6 or is it closer to 7? Well, 6 is the whole number in the ones place. To the right, I have an 8, which is more than 5, tells me to round up. So we would say that 6.8 is closer to 7. And then 4.2, is it closer to 4 or is it closer to 5? Okay, well, 4 is in the ones place. To the right, I have a 2, which tells me to round down. So this tells me that 4.2 is closer to 4. And then 7 times 4 is 28. So that's my estimate. Let's see how that compares to the actual product. So we've got 6.8 times 4.2. So we're going to start by multiplying by the 2. So 2 times 8 is 16. So I keep a 6, I carry a 1. 2 times 6 is 12, plus 1 is 13. I'm going to move to what's in the tens place, so I'm going to add my 0 here. And then 4 times 8 is 32, so I keep a 2, I carry a 3. And then finally, 4 times 6 is 24, but I have to add 3, which makes it 27. And let's figure out our decimal places. So we have 1 decimal place, 1 decimal place, which means my final answer is going to need 2 decimal places. And I completely forgot to add my partial products. Good grief, it is late, but it shouldn't be that late. All right, so let's add our partial products. So 6 plus 0 is 6. 3 plus 2 is 5. 1 plus 7 is 8. There's nothing to add to the 2, so I just drop it down. And we already know that our answer needs 2 decimal places, so we get 28.56. So again, our estimate is a little bit lower than the actual product, but we're off by less than 6/10. We're off by 5,600, so that's not too bad. But again, we would want to say the estimate is an underestimate. All right, so hopefully you can see there is some power to understanding just basic estimation. All right.